Good evening, everybody. It's yours truly, Brandon Rutherman, welcoming you all once again to another edition of the College Football Kickoff Show 10 Qs series. And before we dive into this week's question, got a couple things to pass along to you. First of all, we're in April, and April means spring football. Now, to my understanding, trying to remember, I won't be able to remember them all, but NC State, who's already having a huge weekend with both the men's and women's Final Fours, their football team is having their spring game this Saturday as well. So, a lot going on in Raleigh for sure. That much I do know. The women's Final Four, of course, going down Friday. And, of course, the spring game, I believe the game time for that will be 2 o'clock on the ACC network. And, of course, the Final Four with DJ Burns leading the 11th seeded Wolfpack against Zach Edey and the Purdue Boilermakers in the first national semifinal. Of course, the other finds UConn, the number one overall seed in the NCAA tournament, taking on Alabama. So, there is that. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention really quick is that yours truly is currently in the middle of doing what I like to refer to as the hoodie schedule for the fall. And I think I've talked about this, but I haven't mentioned what it's going to involve. But I did start on looking at the weeks in which I will be doing the college football kickoff show from home. And the whole trick is trying to figure out which hoodies I'm going to wear in a particular Saturday. And I started rounding up candidates of the games that are going down on the weekends in which I will be home. And I got to tell you something. I'm gonna probably find myself spending a fortune on hoodies. Can you imagine this? I mean, I can't. I just can't find it in my heart to tell you which ones I did get. But there are some others. There are other candidates in the offing. I mean, you know I got Oregon. You know I got Alabama. You've seen Rutgers. And you did get a little sneak peek of Minnesota, which I'm still quite positive you're all baffled by it. Minnesota. The Gophers. The Golden Gophers. In my defense, I bought it on sale, okay? Sue me. So, yeah, there's going to be a lot to try and process the closer we get to the start of the season, which, to my understanding, I suppose we can't base it on months and days now. Well, you can do it with days. I do believe we're somewhere in the neighborhood of about 150. Sounds a hell of a lot better than 4 months. But we got to go through the spring games first. May, of course, the college football video game will have its full reveal, and I cannot wait for it. There's a part of me that almost wants to do something in conjunction with it, and I've entertained that thought. And also trying to think of doing some sort of TikTok where I might be channeling a famous coach, and I have at least one in mind. If there is another reason why I have the hoodies that I have, gives me a reason to channel that inner coach, but I just won't say who. I wouldn't even have to impersonate anyone, but there is one in particular that's been kind of on the brain of late. So I'm got it, it never stops. There is no off season for me when it comes to college football, and particularly the college football kickoff show. So now that we got all of that out of the way, now we get down to our question of the week. And this one was submitted to me from my good friend John in Cranberry, who gave us the great question regarding Michigan and Alabama. And the question for this week, quite simply put, is: will Ohio State get over the hump and win the Big Ten? That is a very good question, and one that I think could be asked every year. I do know this from what I saw a year ago. When the schedule came out last year, Ohio State had to run through the gauntlet of 3 huge road games before they could get to Michigan. They managed to win 2 out of the 3. They beat Notre Dame, beat Wisconsin, and the only blemish was the loss to Penn State. Or no, they did win all 3. That's right, because Penn State didn't know how to score. Ooh, I'm sorry. Did I say that out loud? I think I did. Had to do a little head check there. That's right. I remember watching that game. Penn State couldn't do diddly. I mean, if they needed to score, well, I was going to make a comment about Iowa and the inability to score on offense, but Iowa's a different breed of animal. Thanks to Caitlin Clark, my hero, my spirit animal. Love that woman. Love that ball player. Draining everything in the kitchen sink. And congratulations to Iowa for knocking off LSU. I'm very, very happy about that. But anyway, not to get off the page, we must get back on it. I don't know about Ohio State, but I do know this. I remembered having a conversation not very long ago with a gentleman who watches all the activity that I do at Cameron when I do the kickoff show from Cameron Stadium. We had a nice conversation in regards to the hiring of Chip Kelly for offensive coordinator. And it was an eyebrow raiser of immense proportions because, as you know, my love for the Oregon Ducks includes, really, the Chip Kelly era. That was the straw that broke the camel's back, that busted everything wide open, where I went from liking Oregon to loving Oregon. And I have never looked back, and I have no intention to. His presence and his play calling as offensive coordinator, I believe, will either make or break. But this is more to do, I think, with Ryan Day than anything else. Because I'm thinking if Ryan Day does not get Ohio State to a Big Ten championship, and most importantly, if Ohio State does not beat Michigan, I'm thinking that maybe Day will be gone and they won't have to look any further than their own sideline, where Chip Kelly could very, very likely take over as head coach. Looking at what Ohio State's got in front of them, there is a game in Eugene against Oregon. I can't begin to tell you how excited I am for that one. And that's one of those. You know what? I can't even talk about it because, first of all, the season hasn't even started. But if you're an Ohio State Buckeye fan, it's a game that you have to have. I think conference play won't be a problem. I don't think. I mean, and I think the other thing you have to consider too is that they'll have a new quarterback, they'll have a new running back, and they got each of them through the portal. Problem is, I can't remember, well, Quinshawn Judkins. I'm still having trouble trying to pronounce his name, mainly because I don't have a sheet in front of me with his name on it. As you know, we're totally winging it with this edition of the 10 Qs. But you have them both there that came over through the portal. And it's granted, there's experience there at both positions. So that only tells part of the story. The rest of it has to be told on the field by the playmakers on basically every phase, offense, defense, and special teams. You got to make sure that they're all clicking. I mean, there will be some games traditionally, well, I can't really say traditionally. Recent years have suggested that if anytime Ohio State and Indiana gets together, it's always tough. If you have basically any game in the conference, Iowa, I'm sure there's going to be some quirks this year because you don't play every opponent. Now that you have USC, UCLA, Washington, and Oregon, it definitely leaves a lot of food for thought on your schedule, trying to figure out how to go through the minefield of the season that could very easily trip up any playoff hopes with one loss, maybe two, if they're still in the conversation with two losses by the time they get to Michigan. Then that's where I think things may take a turn for the worst. And Ryan Day may very well be gone if and only if a two-loss Buckeye team would lose to Michigan, and then you could pretty much forget about the playoff. I'm an optimist, though, and I believe in my heart of hearts that even though there's not really a gauntlet, unlike last year where they had to go on the road in those three games in South Bend, Happy Valley, and Madison, and winning all three, this is a little different road to travel for Ohio State. Yes, there is the game against Oregon, but as far as the rest of it goes, this is a situation where, I mean, Ryan Day knows the writing's on the wall. And he knows it's now or never. He knows it's go time. And Chip Kelly, I'm sure, will reiterate that and will echo that time and again. And it still feels weird that Chip Kelly is being an offensive coordinator, let alone for Ohio State. It's it I don't know. Sure, it's exciting. I mean, knowing Chip Kelly like I do, he'll light a fire in that offense. Now that I think about it, I don't think I've been this excited for Ohio State, offensively speaking, since the days of Troy Smith, Ted Ginn Jr., and Santonio Holmes and those guys. But can they be mentioned in the same breath as those guys? Maybe. It's a long shot. But, you know, the schedule Not to mention the teams that they have on it. And I will bring Michigan back into this for one very important reason. Michigan also has to replace a quarterback, which I talked about last week, Alex Orji. Sorry. And they have Donovan Edwards back there. Now, will they be the same Wolverines? That's why I think this Michigan-Ohio State game at the end of the year, if it's for the conference championship, I've picked against Michigan the last 2, 3 seasons now. Eventually, at some point, they're going to break through. This could be maybe their best chance, I would think. But again, everything hinges on the conference championship. Now, of course, after Ohio State and Michigan, you have to put Oregon in there, not because I think they deserve to be mentioned in the same breath as Ohio State or Michigan, but, they're in a very good spot here where even though the naysayers think that they're not going to, not going to stack up to Big Ten caliber competition, and Oregon, incidentally, goes to the Big House in November. Lord have mercy, is that going to be fun? I'll cross that bridge when I get to it. Believe me. But everything has to align itself just right for Ohio State to be in the conversation to get over that hump and to win the Big Ten. Because as you all know, with this expanded playoff, the conference champions take up the first, I think, the first 5 seeds, which would be Big Ten, SEC, ACC, Big 12, and who am I leaving out? The at large, I suppose. Unless it's Notre Dame. So yeah, we have technically 4 conferences of great importance, and perhaps maybe the wild card being any non-Power 4 or Power 5 or whatever the hell it's called now. That's asking a lot to shoot for. And for Ohio State, if they get it to that weekend, and, Michigan doesn't necessarily have to be in the same boat with Ohio State. They'd rather not be in the same boat, no matter what the circumstance. I mean, after all, the teams hate each other anyway. But I look at this and figure, rankings are going to be important. The polls, all of it. And Ohio State knows, as we all know, that as we enter perhaps, I think, the most insane, crazy college football season in my lifetime, there's going to be a lot that the experts will process to all of you when you watch the games this fall. But what's really key is focusing on the conference championship. Can Ohio State do it? They can, but will they? Time will tell. And you have to, like I said, you have to take into account all the, what I like to call, extracurricular particulars. Rankings, polls, injuries, yes. All sorts of things. Because you know, when you stir up the contents just right, if everything goes this way, that way, and the other way, you may find Ohio State in that top four going into the playoff. Really, I think, as I said, the writing's on the wall for Ryan Day. This is, by and large, a make or break year for Ryan Day. And for Ohio State, I believe they know the writing's on the wall. I think a win over Michigan may uh, save Ohio State from a lot of aggravation and so much more. But I think it solely depends on whether or not there's more at stake going in, as it almost always is when Ohio State and Michigan get together. Um, I think for the sake of the rivalry, I hope it comes down to it. But me being an Oregon fan, well, I got my own fish to fry knowing that Oregon's got to play both Ohio State and Michigan. And that, if there is a wild card to this, having just now connected the dots between all three teams, those games against Oregon may very well decide the conference. It's funny how these things hit my head as I'm doing this, but here we are coming up on 22 minutes of talk time. And I think we went through the whole minefield as much as I could think of for one question. Knowing that once we get to the season and everything plays itself out just right, we'll have a better idea in a simple case of crossing the bridge when we get to it. I think Ohio State can, but it's up to them. It's up to Ryan Day. It's up to the coaching staff. It's up to the players. They got to give Columbus something in a bit of a. They got to give the faithful, Buckeye Nation, they got to give something to take the weight of the last 3 years off of everybody. Whether, and a Michigan win will do that. A conference championship will do that. You'll be at least one of the top 4 seeds going into the playoff. Not to mention having a home game at the Horseshoe in the first round. So, yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot. But first things first, Ryan Day's got to figure out what kind of a team he's going to have this fall. And they're taking their initial first steps right now. They got their spring game next Saturday on Fox, April 13th, high noon. Do check it out, and we'll draw our own conclusions together on the flip side of it. And oh, by the way, Michigan, April 20th on Fox, high noon as well. I don't know about Oregon's, though. But anyway, I hope that one question gave you as many answers as I could possibly think of, John. Again, thank you for the wonderful questions. And with that, we now close the book on this edition of the College Football Kickoff 10 Qs series for this week, anyway. We'll be back next week with another 10Q session. Not sure what it's going to involve, but I do know what kind of questions I got lined up from those who submitted them. So we'll take a look at what we got left, and we'll decide on that in due time. But for now, from all of me to all of you, BR signing on for the College Football Kickoff Show 10 Qs, and thank you very much.